Hello there everybody, Adam Cleary, FourFourTwo, the Premier League is back, life is worth living. Now, just full disclosure, I had already decided that today's video was going to be on the winning team from the Chelsea versus Liverpool game, but of course, that was a draw, wasn't it? Sort of quite annoying. But thankfully though, it did raise another very good issue, and that is that if you weren't already sure why both of these teams were willing to pay the GDP of a small nation to sign Moises Caicedo, then after that game, you should be. Basically, it is my genuinely held opinion that whichever of these two teams was able to get Caicedo would then immediately become a genuine contender for the Premier League title, and, well, he's going to Chelsea, so we did actually do a full video breakdown on Caicedo like a month ago before all this absolute nonsense started with him, so you can watch that. I'll link it everywhere. But in the context of the game yesterday, there was lots to learn. The main conclusion we drew from that video, though, was that players like him cost so much money, even with such relatively little Premier League experience, because they don't come along very often. He has a very particular set of skills that makes him not just valuable, but rare. Don't know if people still say TLDR, but the TLDR version of that is while Liverpool and Chelsea both have loads of players that can go and win those kind of games, it's very difficult for them to get a player that allows them to control those kind of games. And that's why that game was so end-to-end and back and forth and swung one way and then the other. And while there was loads of chances and everybody was making things happen, but nobody ever really felt like they were in total control of it. But here is the thing, and the reason this was such an exciting result for Chelsea was that while, yeah, they didn't ever feel in total control of it, I would argue they looked much the better side. They looked far more likely to go and win it. Or at least they did after Pochettino made a very particular tactical tweak in the first half, and they then went and got their equaliser. And it's in that specific tactical tweak that I think there is a major clue as to why they can do really big things this season. And that clue, my friends, is one Enzo Fernandez. Alright, so I think everybody and his dog, and by that I mean me and my me, thought that Pochettino would set Chelsea up in kind of a 4-2-3-1. We'd seen it a bit in pre-season. They've got kind of the right players for it. They've got really exciting attackers. Jackson's really good there. They can find players for the pivot, and the back four sort of suits that. But he didn't do that, did he? And in actual fact, they set up with a back three. It wound up being a little bit something like this. Jackson led the line really well. We had Fernandez and Gallagher as a double pivot in the middle, and the two wide attackers, they kept going in nice and narrow to allow the wing backs to push up as high as they could. And this was the build-up shape that Chelsea were going for, because if you've got these two players here combined with that double pivot, that sort of nullifies the box that Liverpool are trying to do while creating loads of space for overlaps in the wide areas. Probably a really sensible way to play against Klopp at the minute. But the problem with it was, and the reason it just flatly didn't work in those first 20 minutes, was Liverpool was so incredibly narrow, it killed any build-up that these three were trying to do. So when Chelsea were building out from the back, you had Salah, Jota and Diaz all moving straight onto the centre-backs, and then because they don't have a natural defensive midfielder, all three of their players in that position were equally as narrow and just smothering both Fernandez and Gallagher. If they brought the fullbacks a little bit nearer in to try and sort of build out that way, then Liverpool would simply just shuffle across one and still overload those areas of the pitch. And it might not seem like it, but this is genuinely all about Fernandez. Like, he is one of the most dynamic, exciting, just vibrant midfielders in the Premier League, and he did show it in fits and starts last season, but one of the major problems he had at Chelsea was he was having to play so deep to be so important to their build-up, he couldn't impact the game further up the pitch. And I earnestly believe the reason Poch was going with this system with three defenders at the back was effectively like a Caicedo stopgap. So they would still have three players in this area that could do the build-up, but they wouldn't require Fernandez to drop in and help. Like, if we just take Liverpool out of the equation for a second here, what they wanted to happen was for Silva to move into this sort of area because he's got a great range of passing as well. Then you get a nice little triangle going with the two other centre-backs and the goalkeeper, because of course they've got Sanchez now, and he's dead good with the ball at his feet. And this would mean that Gallagher was then free to get between the lines, find space, the thing he's really good at, and Fernandez could receive the ball pretty much anywhere, and if he did have to drop back to receive it, he was still doing that about 20 yards further up the pitch than he would have been doing last season, meaning he could then drive with it and use his dribbling ability. But of course, as we've discussed, Liverpool just absolutely smothered this plan and it never really got going. Now, Pochettino's solution to this was incredibly clever. He just allowed Ben Chilwell to play up as high as he wanted, and he shuffled this back three into a back four with Reece James basically using his engine to play as a traditional right back, but also get up whenever he could. And it worked really well. Liverpool didn't really know what to do with it. Salah stuck with Colwill, so he's all the way over on this side now. Jota stuck with Silva, so he's all the way on that side now. And all of a sudden, Diaz isn't sure whether he should be with Diazy or he should be with James. If he stuck in the middle, it allowed James to push forward and get overlaps going with Raheem Sterling, but when he pushed across to him, that then meant that the rest of the midfield had to move around, and this allowed Chilwell to receive the ball in a lot more space. But the really, really clever part about it is it then enables one of these two midfielders to drop, knowing that Liverpool won't push that high up and commit an extra player forward there. One of them can drop into that space, and all of a sudden they can do the triangle with the ability to then get through the lines. You've shuffled Liverpool around in a way that allows you to do that. Now think about it. You're Mauricio Pochettino. You now have a circumstance where you can put a really good player, someone who's good on the ball, who can make things happen, who can beat a press, who's really, really good in that area. You can put one of Fernandez and Gallagher here. What do? Common sense says you put Fernandez there. So he was playing last season, and yeah, he's not the best use of him, but he is really, really good at that. And then you just have Gallagher run around and try and find space and do his thing. But no, he did not do that. He refused to put Fernandez in a deep area. Instead, Gallagher went and sat there, which is not his thing at all. He's not a player that suits that role particularly well. He's great off the ball, and he runs and he collects it, and he's dangerous in the final third, but he does just about have the sort of game IQ and just the drive and the determination to not let you down. And that's an enormous risk by Pochettino, by the way. Like, if he wasn't reading the game properly, Liverpool would pass around him. If he was too weak in the tackle, Liverpool would just play through him. They could have absolutely swamped him. He could have just got bored and wandered up the pitch as his natural footballing instincts would have told him to do, but he did a really, really good job there. Chelsea stopped going as narrow to effectively sort of stretch Liverpool's back line a bit, and that meant that whichever midfielder then got drawn to Gallagher, because somebody had to go with him, Fernandez would then just move into the space on that side and was receiving the ball behind Liverpool's midfield repeatedly, and he became almost immediately Chelsea's most dangerous player. No goals or no assists to show for it, but if you watch the game, it was all going through him. The times where Chelsea were able to get on top of this game were the times where they weren't able to live with Fernandez. And honestly, if you've only watched Fernandez in the Premier League, I cannot tell you how much better he is in this part of the pitch than he is in this part. Like, if we compare his FB ref profiles from the first half of last season when he was playing for Benfica and the second half of last season when he's playing for Chelsea, like, look at this. His passing numbers, they're amazing. They stayed consistent. He made the adaptation to the Premier League absolutely seamlessly, but the one major difference between these numbers is in where he was doing this. The drop-off between the number of touches he is having per game in the attacking portions of the pitch when he moves to Chelsea is absolutely glaring. Like, clearly, this is a player who, at his most comfortable, wants to be getting involved in these areas of the pitch. Like, for a player who was effectively sitting as a double pivot, so a deep position, that's a huge number to be having here, but that drops right off when he moves to the Premier League. His carries tell a similar story as well. He was not daunted by the change to the Premier League. He's still doing it as often and doing it as far, but just the amount of times he's able to do that in dangerous areas also drops right off. Like, yes, granted, spending like 800 bajillion quid is obviously going to improve Chelsea as a team, but Pochettino's real job, if we're honest, was to get in there, identify which players were just never going to work out and get rid of them, and then work out which players still had something to give, which players had not shown the best of themselves in a Chelsea shirt, and get that out of them. And I would argue, next to only Mudryk, Enzo Fernandez is the one player who can have the biggest possible step up in terms of contribution for Chelsea this season. And I think it's pretty obvious that Pochettino agrees with that for three fairly glaring reasons. First of all, they clearly came up with a system, possibly just for this game, that was going to allow Fernandez to not get bogged down in the build-up and do his work in this area of the pitch. Secondly, when that system clearly didn't work and he should have thrown him into a deep area, he put a far less suitable player in instead because he felt the reward of having him further up was worth that risk. And three, they're going to spend 115 million quid on Moises Caicedo, arguably the most perfect player in the Premier League, to play this role. And I don't want to go over the ground from the other video too much, but he absolutely is. If Chelsea are going to play with four at the back, he is probably the one player in the Premier League after Rodri you would want to have to drop in, to receive the ball, to be involved in that build-up, to beat a press, to go past players, to do these first phases while you've got another midfielder who can then push on as a result. Fernandez found himself in that role repeatedly last year because Chelsea did not have another tool in their box because he was by far and away the best player at Chelsea to do it, but while that was good for the system, it wasn't good for him. So now you go and get a player who is good for the system and you just play with the box of attacking toys that is Enzo Fernandez. You signed him in the first place so he could do things like this. The fact that he has spent 6 months in a far more physically demanding league doing a far less fun job, I think says absolutely loads about the caliber of the player they actually have on their hands here. Now, okay, if you're not a Chelsea fan, you might have found the start of that video saying they're genuine title contenders as a bit of a reach, and okay, there's still a couple of question marks at the back. Surely Thiago Silva can't keep playing this well for this long at that age. That's silly. And are the goals going to flow as easily as they did in pre-season? All valid points, sure. But championships are decided, they live and die, honestly, by your midfield, I think. And of all the teams in the Premier League who will be playing at 2 this season, I genuinely cannot think of a better possible pairing than Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo. I'm not saying they've got the best midfield in the Premier League, I'm not saying that, but I think for the system they're going to play, I just think it's going to be so effective against so many teams. Now, don't get me wrong, a statement win over Liverpool would have been very convenient for the purposes of this video, but they didn't get that. But I think anybody with either eyes or a brain will have watched that game and think that this Chelsea look night and day compared to what shambles they were last season. Which, again, got to give Pochettino credit there. He's turned that around, or at least started to turn it around very quickly. Anyway, just my opinion, isn't it? Would love to hear yours in the comments below as ever. And of course, if you want to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter. I don't do much else other than just think about football, so you might as well help. At Adam Cleary, CLERY, the entire 442 family, available to you for completely free at 442, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the really good stuff. Please do subscribe to the channel, by the way, if you enjoyed this kind of video. The Premier League is just back and there's so much to talk about, and we will be doing that, and it'd be lovely to have you along for the ride. Until next time, though, thank you very much for watching. I'm away to go put a speculative £10 on Chelsea to win the league because I'm just very irresponsible with money, and yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye.